Happy Thanksgiving, everybody! Just got back from engorging myself in food. Hope everybody had a good Thanksgiving. We just got out of, me, my mom, and her sister, my aunt, went and saw Catching Fire. And this is going to be tough to say much about because pretty much everything that I had to say about the first one applies to this. It's just more so. I thought the Catching Fire is a lot better than the first one, the just regular Hunger Games. I think the switch of director was a good choice. They switched to Francis Carpenter, Francis something. He's the guy that did I Am Legend and Constantine, and I think the choice of switching directors was a good idea. Mainly because he decided, hey, I'll go out and I'll spend $40 and I'll get a fucking tripod so that we can put the camera on it and so it's steady and so people can see our shots. Which the first director apparently didn't do. Yeah, acting is solid, flows really nicely. One of my favorite things about it was the satire on reality TV and things like TMZ and obsession with celebrities, and I like how it makes fun of how stupid that all is. In fact, it probably one-ups that even more so, because I can't stand that shit. I hate like reality shows and anything like that, and kind of like celebrity gossip, obsession stuff. It very much is a satire on that. And I do mean satire. It's an actual satire. Like people who come up to me and say, oh, I like Scream and how it's a satire on horror movies. No, it's not it doesn't have a single intelligent thing to say about it. It just points to other horror movies and says, hey, remember that? It's not satire. It's not subtle in any way, shape, or form. This is actual satire, what they do in this. What else did I like about it? I like how it's tricky because on paper, this movie could have very easily bombed. Like, it could have fallen flat on its face because the problem with sequels is what? They're just a retread. They just repeat the same pattern as the first movie. It's essentially the same story, same characters, etc., etc. Like a basic pattern of repetition. That's the big problem people have with sequels, right? And on paper, a lot of the stuff is the same as the first one, but they do just the right amount of twists and in just the right places that it becomes an entirely different movie. For example, it starts off with, what comes with being a champion of these games. The quote-unquote celebrity status, it really mimics like child stars in real life, how they do one thing and then for the rest of their life they're branded or they're followed by cameras everywhere. Whether it's a success story or not is not always is up for debate. Like Lindsay Lohan went one way and then Leonardo DiCaprio went another. He's a child star. He was in The Quick and the Dead with Sam Raimi. He was like 11 or 13. No, he's like 15 or 16 in that. But there's a lot of parallels with like child stars and things like that. And I like that. I like everything that Katniss has on her plates. She's got eyes on her everywhere, and having survived the Hunger Games, you think like, whew, like the worst is over. But really, the nightmare just kind of begins. I like seeing Peeta, who was a bland fucking vanilla character in the first movie, is actually getting something to work with. I mean, full disclosure, have not read the books. I don't read the books before the movie because I want to enjoy the movie. I don't want to have any kind of expectation going into it because 99% of the time, the movie is shit and the book is better. There are exceptions, as always. Lord of the Rings, most of the Harry Potter movies, and now Hunger Games. From what I'm hearing from a lot of people, they're pretty. The quality is up there. Out of all the young adult, out of this the sheer shitstorm that is young adult movie adaptations. Thank God for the Hunger Games for actually having talent and, you know, like craft put into them to the point where they stand up as being something that can be taken seriously by people like me who have never read the books whatsoever. They don't just rely on a fan base, which again, like Mortal Instruments, Beautiful Creatures, Vampire Academy that's coming out, which, by the way, we got a trailer for the movie called Vampire Academy. It feels like it came out like 3 years too late. Sorry, phone's still on. That's real professional. But, Vampire, it's this, like, snappy, like, high schoolers that are that also happen to be vampires going to school, wacky hijinks ensue. Like, who gives a shit? Like, my mom and my aunt are both slavish fans of Twilight, and they just looked at each other like, really? We're still doing this? And it's like, yeah, exactly. But anyway, so yeah, young adult novels tend to not make the transition very well into movies. Thank God for the Hunger Games, and thank God for, you know, actual talent being put into them, so that we can get a demographic outside of just girls that read the books. It appeals to other people as well. It has something to say. It says things about our obsession with, you know, celebrities and fame. It deals with just the sheer, like, violence. It has to do with government corruption, or at least now it does. It didn't before. I think where the movie kind of loses me, and not by much, but where the movie kind of loses me is in just little pockets here and there. There was no, like, running thing that deterred me off track from the movie, and there was no big pothole that I sank into. Like, for example, the fact in the first one how the finale to the movie was dogs. Okay? That completely eliminates the whole, like, them killing each other, like, the disturbing element of that, because now it's just wildlife killing them. And I know that in the book, it was like, oh, the scientists made the dogs out of the corpses of their friends. Whether that was there or not, it's still such a weird curveball to throw into a elementary school battle royale. That's an exaggeration, but you get what I mean. Kids killing kids. That it was weird. The fact that the first movie didn't have one of my few complaints of the first movie was that it didn't have much bite to it. It had all the build up done fairly well. It was a little uneven. The Catching Fire fixes that. But one of my few complaints about the first one was how uneven the setup was, and then the violence was very kiddie. It was very shaky cam. It cut away from a lot of things. You couldn't see what was happening. And you could argue that it's kids killing kids, and censorship wouldn't have gone for that. And it's a young adult novel, can't show that kind of thing. I disagree, but I get where you're coming from. I don't agree that that's where that should have been taken. Not saying there should be a hard R or anything like that. It shouldn't be a bloodbath, but I get where you're coming from at least. Now it's not only the second book, but it's been a few years since the first movie has been out, and those juveniles that supposedly, you know, you couldn't show that stuff to have grown up. And now that in Catching Fire, it's not just kids killing kids, it's champions killing each other. These are people who are veterans. They are experienced. They're older. They're around Katniss's age, if not older. One of them is I forgot his actual name, but he's like a scientist, and he has made scientific developments for the nation, and that so you've got adults competing in this. There's no reason whatsoever that you have to be so tee-hee, cut away from the violence kind of thing. The violence has, like, no bite to it. In fact, it was probably... Okay. The first one, the game was probably the least interesting thing in the movie, because everything else, the satire on TV, the character of Katniss, all that stuff, that was more and surviving, that was more interesting than the actual games themselves. In this, not so much the case. The games are not as interesting as the setup with the celebrity status and things like that. Because some people told me that that was their issue with this movie, and I disagree. Though it's not as interesting as the reality stuff, what was the most boring to me, and this is a legitimate ding against the movie that I have, it's the love triangle shit. What is that doing in a movie about government corruption and a revolution and keeping and living a lie? What is this? It has no place whatsoever. It has no place. If it's in the book, fine, great. It hurts the movie. And the thing is that the books have more time to dish out that kind of stuff. That's great. So if it works, I believe that it works in the book, but it doesn't work in the movie because it has so little time. What's his face? The guy that plays oh god, I can't even think of his name. Liam. I know it's Liam Hemsworth. That plays like the guy that. I remember his name, but I heard it too. Is it Gale or Kale? I don't know which it is. Someone comment, tell me what it is, because I heard both during the movie. But it would help if maybe he gave a shit, if he actually acted in his role, because there's absolutely nothing. It's like watching Jennifer Lawrence make out with a plank whenever they're trying to interact with each other, because it's not her fault. He's giving her absolutely nothing to work with. It's the most boring part of the movie. Granted, it's altogether, if you add it up, it's probably like 3 minutes of the movie, so I guess I can't complain too much, but they really were like, they would cut back to the District 12 and he's like watching the TV and she makes this big trip back there just to try and convince him to run away with her, and I'm like, I didn't buy a single second of it because there's nothing there. There's zero chemistry. The movie already has enough to do without wasting time on this love triangle bullshit. Love triangle bullshit shouldn't be a plot thing anymore anyway. It was ridden into the ground before Twilight dug it up, pissed all over it, and then buried it again. But if you're gonna do it, at least get an actor that cares about his paycheck or about his craft. Anyway, moving away from that, I thought that was the most boring part of the movie. Not the games themselves. The games themselves have a little bit more bite than the first one. They still cut away. It's still pretty bloodless, and it's still kind of a disappointment, especially since there's no excuse now because they're all adults. But at least the camera is steady. Legitimate upgrade from the first movie. No more shaky cam bullcrap, which I hate. They actually, like I said, they invested $40 in a tripod, and they actually got steady camera, so good job. I'm glad the first movie made enough money to buy a couple of tripods. I don't know that I have too much else to say. Not anything that's not a spoiler. I don't want to spoil the movie for people because, for if you haven't read the book or not, I don't want to ruin too much. So I guess I'll just stop right there. I will say that the twists that the movie takes that people that have read the books already know about, I didn't see coming, which is a rare thing. I tend to be able to spot the plot twist to a movie by looking at the poster, so it caught me off guard. They still tried to pull some, like, animal, like, let's release wildlife into this thing. I'm like, this is still stupid. It's not as bad as the dogs, but, still stupid. What else was I gonna say? Oh, very last thing, and then I promise I'm done. It was always weird to me in the first movie how absolutely everyone in the districts are all like, they all act the exact same way, like none of them stand out, and then the people in the capital all acted exactly the same. They're all the same foppish, overly done, and I get that that's kind of the point, especially with the capital. It's making a statement on glamorizing true beauty and stuff like that, or I mean, glamorizing whatever. It's commentating on public perception of beauty. But, I mean, I get that part, but I would have liked to have seen at least one character. And in this, holy fuck, like, I forgot about the Lenny Kravitz character. I don't know if that's actually him, but I call him the Lenny Kravitz character, who makes Katniss's wardrobe. Elizabeth Banks' character, God, I miss seeing her in movies because she does a good job. It's nice to see them actually, that there's actually people amongst them. And Philip Seymour Hoffman is another one he's in the Capitol, yeah, but he has the same job as Gonorrhea Face in the first movie, and he doesn't look all stupid, got up, and whatever. He looks just like a normal dude, and I appreciated that. But yeah, so okay, that was the last thing. Catching Fire, 2 thumbs up. One of my favorite things this year. Is it flawed? Yeah, but just not by much. It improves on all the things that were good about the first one are made more so. They even improve on a couple of things, like the shaky cam and the satire. Wish I had a little bit more bite to it, but I get why they can't do it. I don't agree with that necessarily. I wouldn't have done it that way. I still would have gone PG-13, but I would show a little bit more. But I'm not going to complain about having a good book adaptation. Because I have a feeling, and I'm really trying not to jinx it, I'm trying not to be pessimistic, but I have a feeling I'm going to complain with the third one and the fourth one, because the third book is doing that stupid bullshit where it's being split into 2 movies. And I'm sorry, that doesn't work. No story needs to be split up that way. Doesn't matter if it's based off a book or not, doesn't need it. Because the first one is all set up, it's all the setup, and then the second half is the delivery part. So what you end up is a movie that's all set up and no payoff, and a movie that's nothing but payoff. That's why they don't make 5.5-hour movies. It's because you're supposed to condense it into one gratifying thing right then and there. Sequel, yes, fine, but it's not literally the exact... I'm not getting into that now. It doesn't work. It didn't work with Harry Potter, and Harry Potter is a really good series. But if Harry Potter can't get over that, I'm sorry, The Hunger Games is not going to either. So I am perfectly open to being wrong if the next 2 movies want to step it up a notch and be the exception to the rule. I'm all for it. I'm just not going to be holding my breath, because you either split them in 2, like with Harry Potter and Twilight and shit, and you get, like I said, you get a boring movie and then a batshit crazy movie. Or you get Lord of the Rings, where everyone's ass is numb from like a million fake endings. And then, even though Lord of the Rings is really good, people whine and bitch and complain about how it has a million endings and doesn't end. So, whatever. But for now, right now, Catching Fire, 2 thumbs up.